Hello everyone! You are watching Chapter 17 of my TearRing Saga Champions of Utena low turn count playthrough. In this chapter, according to the story, we are teaming up with Duke Raziel of Salia, better known as Lionheart, in order to liberate the city of Selba. News of our approach, however, causes Duke Carnell, who has been controlling Selba on behalf of the Empire, to decide to flee and attempt to take the riches of the city with him. Carnell and a number of guards appear as enemies on this map, and catching and killing them is an important side objective that we're going to do our best to achieve. During the story scene opening this chapter, the main boss, Bishop Marshall, expresses a desire to surrender, but Carnell forces him to remain behind and act as a decoy for his escape. And killing him and seizing the point that he is standing on is the main objective of this chapter. According to the game, there is a hidden alternate objective for this map, but I have absolutely no idea what it is. I assumed it had something to do with letting Carnell escape while Marshall was still alive, but it doesn't look like that's the case. Whatever the case, let's move on now. Lionheart's forces also appear on the map, and one of them in particular is Shiro, who we will be recruiting at the end of this chapter. Shiro is a mounted bow user, but his stats are pretty uninspiring, and he doesn't even get Kanto until level 14. The one skill that he does have is his class skill, called Grass Runner, and this is the terrain skill for grass and plains type maps. Grass Runner is pretty much entirely useless for saving turns, and in fact I believe it's the only terrain skill that I do not teach to anyone in Blad on Holmes' side, so that doesn't help him all that much. Alright, so at the end of chapter 10, we picked up a couple of new units that I haven't discussed yet. The first of these is Mince, who I've deployed on this chapter, because he is really good. Mince is a black paladin with some solid bases and also the wrath skill. I've already gone over how good that is, so I won't belabor the point. The key thing about Mince though is his class skill, which is called Flurry, and it is probably the most broken skill in the entire game. Flurry is a command skill that you can activate against any enemy with at least one lower attack speed than you have, and it activates 2 to 5 rounds of combat when activated. That means that, at the bare minimum of its use, it is lowering the threshold for doubling from 5 all the way down to 1, as long as your opponent either can't counter or goes down in 2 hits. But its utility goes far beyond that because of the additional rounds that it can proc. If you're able to trigger it with a ranged weapon against an enemy with a shield, for instance, then you can easily break that shield in a single unit's action, rather than having to use several units to achieve the same end. Keep in mind, though, that any effects applied during your flurry apply to the full flurry. It's not actually treated as several separate combat rounds going off consecutively. All in all, Flurry is a truly amazing skill, and it has some extremely important uses later on in this run, although I don't actually use it all that much as a general option. Mince also comes with a second Killer Lance, which is good because the Killer Lance is a thoroughly reliable weapon that I'm always glad to have more of. Now let's talk about Leonie. She is an archer, but she also has Flurry at base, so she has some interesting uses in a more casual run. If you gave Mince the extra turn he needed in order to effect her escape back in chapter 10, he would need to visit a house on this map in order to recruit her now, and that would be annoying because I'm using Mince for some combat roles in this chapter, so it's a good thing that we got her earlier. Besides Flurry, Leonie can learn Paragon at level 9, so if you give her some investment, she can really deliver. She is also tied for having the highest movement growth in the entire game, at 10%, which compounds the possible return on any investment you put into her. In this run though, she's just another bad archer to throw on the heap. Marshall, the aforementioned main boss of this map, is a bishop, and that means he can use both tomes and staves. He has a meteor tome, which would make him extremely easy to double, but he also has a physics staff, and if any unit on the entire map is left with less than full HP at the start of an enemy phase, he will switch to that, which prevents Mince from being able to flurry him and forces me to rely on a Killer Lance critical hit to kill him. Despite this consideration, I did end up making him switch to his physics staff on this turn, and that is because once the green units get close enough to start dealing damage to the red units, they are all but guaranteed to leave at least one of them on low HP, so it doesn't matter all that much if I force him to switch to physic earlier than that. So now that the knot of enemies near our starting position has been dealt with, we're able to have Esther lower the bridge using the bridge key that we've saved from Chapter 7. This is necessary to give Runan the shortest possible run to the siege point. Meanwhile, all of my decent move units that are not helping Runan reach the siege point have headed over into the center of the map to pick up a couple of valuable item drops over there. Zieg is particularly effective at this, as he is able to double and one-round the enemies straight through their shields with his Devil Lance. The items that we want in particular are the secret potion from one of the group escorting Duke Carnell, which will be used to give +3 skill to a unit later on, and the arrow spate from the ballistician up near the top of the map, which is going to be very important for Tom to use in a later map. Zieg also grabbed a Pylum, but we're going to have to leave the enemy with a droppable hero crest, which isn't particularly valuable to me anyway. The green units are now making a move on some of the enemies up there, and we see Shiro having a go at this mounted unit. Shiro needs to survive this chapter in order for us to recruit him at the end of it, but that's generally not a problem because not many enemies attack him, and it's especially not a problem because we're clearing the chapter so fast. Another thing you'll note about the green units is that their combat against the enemies is completely garbage. It takes 4 of them working in tandem to just kill one unit, and this is why it's pretty much impossible to stop Marshall from switching to his physics staff, because they're just too incompetent to get 2 kills or to back off if they're not going to be killing something. There are several houses scattered across this chapter, and at the start, we picked up a Levin sword from the house nearest to our starting position. In my previous LTC run of this game, this ended up seeing a lot of use as Sasha's weapon of choice, but in this run it's just going to be handed over to Martel as soon as possible. At the end of this turn, a group of mounted thieves appear as reinforcements at the top of the map. These reinforcements repeat for several turns after this, and some of them have droppable money bags, though we aren't going to be picking up any of those. We are now facing Duke Carnell in combat, and when I was originally playing this map, I didn't think that killing him was going to do anything of note. I just wanted to kill him because he is kind of an asshole, and I can be pretty vindictive when I feel the need. However, killing Carnell does end up having an important side effect, and that is that we pick up the Salia Codex. The effect of this item is to increase several of the holder's growth rates by 10% each, and that includes stats such as strength, skill, and speed, all of which I need on certain units. So managing to pick this up was a moment of serendipity in this run. We now have Mince face Marshall to get him off the siege point, and thankfully I managed to defeat him instantly with a Killer Lance critical hit, and that prevents him from physicking up Carnell and preventing me from getting the kill on him on the following player phase. Now, the Salia Codex is not the only growth boosting item in this game. There is also a Reeve Codex, which we would be getting after this chapter if we had Marouge and Runan's army at this point. Of course, Sylphid is a much more important item in the long run, so it's not all that bad that we miss out on this. Rathbun has now reached the upper part of the map and is killing this ballistician to get the arrow spade for Tom. The arrow spade is a pretty strong weapon with 3 to 7 range, so that gives Tom some strong niches in combat as we go through the next few maps. Arcus dismounted in order to cross the river at the ford a couple of turns ago, and that's because he is heading for the remaining house with an item. This house contains a Sage's Cloak, which for me isn't going to be very much use other than as something I can sell for money, because once again, promotion items in this run are not all that valuable, as I just can't get all that many units to level 10. Now we can see an interesting point about the green units' AI. They pretty much always retreat to use their healing items if they're damaged at all. In addition, their AI generally tends to target the thieves that appear as reinforcements, rather than continuing to harry the group with droppable items, on account of that group having shields all over the place. These two AI factors mean that it's pretty unusual for the green units to steal any of the kills, and thus deny us droppable items that we might want, which is kind of a nice thing. There is a blue-roofed house on this map as well, and going into there means that you can teach a unit the Grass Runner skill. This is the first blue-roofed house in the game that I am not going to visit, because as I've already mentioned, Grass Runner is a very bad skill, and additionally the house itself is well out of the way of any of our units. In fact, from this point on, pretty much none of the blue houses left in the game are in reach for viably reducing my turn count. We are now able to have Mariel finish off Carnell. He is holding a main gauche which boosts his avoid, so it's lucky that Starlight is so incredibly accurate. Mariel picks up a full level because Carnell does give boss experience, but she is still only level 3, so there's no danger of her reaching promotion level anytime soon. With Carnell defeated, all we have left is a tiny bit of tidying up. Firstly, we finally have Arcus visit the house in order to pick up the Sage's Cloak, which would be very useful for promoting Mariel, but of course she's not going to get there. We also need to finish off one of the soldiers to grab the secret potion that I mentioned earlier. If you wait around long enough on this chapter for all of the thief reinforcements to arrive, you'll eventually see another boss called Perm, and he is in charge of these thieves, but he brings with him another boss, and that would be Rakus, who is one of the Guardian Dragons, making this chapter the first chapter in the game where it is possible to face one of the Guardian Dragons as an enemy unit. There is really no point in waiting around for that long though, so we are going to skip that completely by having Runan seize to complete the chapter in 5 turns. So after the map, we pick up Shiro, and the remaining Salian forces return to Blard to hold off the last few enemies that they have on their flanks. Meanwhile, we are going to be heading off to Fort Bolt. That's all for this video, and I will see you next time.